Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Steph of Steph Sketch, and today we're going to go over a time lapse of a dog character sketch with a little voiceover to explain my process. I have other videos that are just time-lapse demos of my process, but I thought that today we could go over a breakdown of what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, and just kind of have a verbal explanation of what's going on. Hopefully you'll be inspired to try some of these techniques for yourself and see that anybody can draw animals in a characterful way. This particular sketch is a pet portrait commission, and rather than doing a traditional portrait, I like to give the animals a little more character and caricature, as if they're going to be like in an animation film. I guess it's what you would call, Disneyfying animals, in other words. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking at the reference drawings that I have, the reference photos on the left side of Hopper. This is Hopper. Right now, I'm just trying to get a sense of his character and his shapes. What does he generally look like? And of course, because, this is a commissioned portrait, I am trying to get as close as possible to doing a, fairly close enough caricature portrait of this little guy. But at the same time, it is a caricature, so it's okay if it's going to be off a little bit. The real emphasis here is just kind of capturing his personality, capturing the essence of what I see in these photos and what his personality might be. So, in looking in, I put down these three, but he actually sent me probably a few more photos, and I'm looking at them right now on another screen. But Hopper kind of has, he's, kind of a little bit of a serious guy. He doesn't have his mouth open, so I wouldn't say I'm not saying he's not energetic, but he is a more subtle, down-to-earth, maybe a calm dog. And I actually think as a story artist, being a story artist myself, I do feel like capturing these very subtle characteristics of personality and behavior are really what define a character. Be it a person, an animal, robot, whatever, what have you. Doing these very subtle facial expressions. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So doing these very subtle facial expressions and, little micro movements sometimes can really make a big difference in capturing that essence. And especially since this is a commissioned pet portrait, I really want to make sure that I get that down. So as you can see, now that I had already gotten through the gesture portion, kind of the rough version of Hopper, and I felt like I had gotten it to a place that felt like a pretty good, shape-wise, blocking-wise, the way he was holding himself, I felt like was really good. So that's why I just decided, I'm just gonna start drawing. And to be honest, that's lucky. I don't always hit it the first time. I sometimes am doing these pet portraits, and maybe you might see it in the other videos. And sometimes I'm doing them, I'm just trying to nail it still in the first hour. and so it's not always an easy hit or an easy capture. You have good drawing days and bad drawing days. And today happened to be one of those drawing days where I was actually able to, nail my lines a little bit more and capture more of him and his subtleties than, maybe another day. Again, referencing back to Hopper and doing these finer details, I do see that he is a little bit more of a wiry dog. He has, a little bit more extra, thin strands kind of coming out. It's almost like he's got this, of course, like an underlayer coat, and then he's got these longer strands that are coming out. And that's actually that's something that you really want to capture. If that's part of his personality, it's part of his character, right? Like, an animal's fur and, is basically essentially their costume. So that's something that I'm trying to capture here. So right now, still fiddling with the ear. Quite obviously, I'm having some trouble trying to nail that shape. And also that perspective. Perspective is a big deal. So just trying to make sure that I can get those properly. Now I'm probably erasing those eyes because I feel like I could do a better job with them. Because the eyes are, as they say, the window to the soul. And I know it might seem silly that I'm doing them over and over, but to me, I feel like making sure that I get the eyes right, and also, of course, the pupils, to make sure that I'm getting them at the exact place that makes sense, that he's looking at us, is very critical to have that connection, because you want to have a connection between your audience and your piece. So it's no one would blame you if you wanted to spend a little bit more time on the eyes. All right, so now it looks like I'm actually about to start coloring. My method of coloring, or as you could say, doing this digital painting, my method of doing it is to use a kind of a broad textured brush. So I'll kind of, pick a color that's, close enough, like the general broad color of what this character might look like, and I'm gonna fill it in. And I'm not really thinking about being that accurate in filling it in, because I can always just erase that later, but I'm just trying to block in his coat and just kind of fill him in. And I like this brush. This brush is it's kind of got this rough, dry feel to it. And it's got a nice light opacity too, so I can kind of gently go over it again and again, and it might get a little bit more solid and darker, but when you first apply it, it's a little bit translucent. You can kind of see that on the bottom. It's a little bit translucent there. But I love that style of brush. And you could probably create that kind of brush, or there are tons of brushes you could get online. So with using this same brush, I'm now applying the lighter coat to him. So, I mean, he does of course have this undercoat, this kind of like light tan undercoat, but you can kind of also see that a lot of him is that, very thin, wiry, white top coat. It's almost just almost like cream-like. So I'm just trying to capture, at this point, I'm still blocking in tones. So trying to feel and figure out, where his darkness is, right? Where his light colors are, where his midtones are. Right now I'm darkening around his eyes because I want those to pop out. So by having a contrast between the dark color and then the light color around it, our eye will just automatically hone in on his eyes almost immediately. That the idea is to get that to be one of the first things that you look at. So now it looks like I'm just sort of like softening up edges and kind of still adding a little bit of tone here and there. Kind of pushing and pulling, experimenting. It's all about experimenting and feeling out what looks and feels right. It looks like I'm noodling here because I'm trying to understand the shadow shapes along his snout area between his eye and his nose. So it looks like I'm kind of trying to play in those areas. And sometimes when you're doing this, you can get really caught up in the details. Obviously, you're seeing me do that. I can really easily get caught up in the details. But in reality, you need to look at the big picture, because you're not gonna, your audience and yourself, are not gonna be looking at this or any image up really close. You're gonna be looking at it from pretty far away, probably at least a few feet away. If once I print this out and I send it to the customer. The customer is not going to be, staring at this very, very closely. Most likely, they'll be about 2 feet away from it, even 5 feet away from it. You're just walking by the hallway. So you don't want to get too caught up in the details. And I think sometimes it's so easy to forget when you're doing this, when you're in it. You're just kind of caught up in these little details because you're just like, I want it to look just like this. I want it to look just like this photo, or I really want to capture this very specific detail. But in reality, sometimes, and actually most times, the best thing to do, the best piece of advice when you're kind of caught up in that tornado of just indecision, between trying to figure something out or just problem solving an area, is to take a step back and just simplify it. This even, like I'm talking about Disneyfying these animal portraits. I'm taking a look at the broader spectrum of these animals, and then I'm trying to break them down into simple shapes, simple forms, and then even their coats, trying to simplify that, even though I know that can be very difficult. So you know, in the end, it looks like I just kind of went very simple with his coat, and I'm sure I will go back into it again and noodle with it. But the reality is that the more simple and well designed you do your, painting decisions, your drawing decisions, then the clearer the read it will be for you and your audience. Now it looks like I'm adding in the highlights. because I'm checking back at the photos, and I noticed that he's got a lot more lightness to him. So I'm gonna add in more of that light coloring into, just in broader areas, especially like in his muzzle, around his face, to kind of brighten that up a bit. So it looks like I'm trying to add that detail. And actually, once you add the highlights, you can see how things start to also pop, right? Now there's an extra dimension to him. It looks like there's an extra layer over his fur. So that's kind of the amazing thing that, highlights and shadows can do. If you can apply them in the right way, they can really bring out form and structure and, just a lot of depth to your pieces. So a fun little fact about Hopper, he apparently has a interesting gene that doesn't allow him to produce any black pigment. So his owner was telling me that because of this gene, all the parts of this dog that are normally black, like the nose, the foot pads, areas on the mouth, eyes, etc., are all brown instead, and that it also accounts for his yellow eyes and brown colored ears. So because the customer mentioned all of this is why I'm spending particularly more time just trying to get the coloring of the dog just right. That his nose is a lighter color and with just a touch of, reddish hue, that his eyes are yellow, and, all of those details make Hopper who he is, and I have to make sure that I nail those points. I'm trying to scale back some of that color because I think it was probably a little bit too dark. So still checking back on those reference photos because Hopper's generally pretty light. So still want a hint of the dark tones, but it looks like I lightened some of those up. But you can kind of still get some of that, feel the depth that's there. And all of this now is just really doing minor details and touch-ups. Adding in a little more highlights to match his little lighter muzzle, to add that to the rest of the body. At this point, I'm just trying to put him in the correct vertical format for a portrait. Just, you know, sensing that he's probably going to look better vertically, so that's why I'm switching him up. All right, and I think that's basically it. If you've stuck through this entire video, thank you so much for listening, for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any comments or questions about this video, or if there's anything else you want to see, or if you want to commission yourself, feel free to leave a comment or request down in the comments below. Any questions and comments are going to be helpful. Obviously, I'm still new at YouTube and getting started with this. If you liked this video and got something out of it, please give it a thumbs up below and subscribe. Subscribe for more, you know, tutorials, demos. I'm definitely going to start talking about storyboarding really soon. I have some videos lined up about storyboarding and how to do more of that and how to get into the industry. Thank you so much for watching, and see you guys next time.